Hello, and welcome to your online strength coach podcast, episode 41, conditioning for strength athletes, and the weekend warrior. Hello, and welcome to episode 41 of your online strength coach podcast. It is still Wednesday, the 9th of September, 2015, that's the 9th. This was the second podcast recording of the day. Haven't had any feedback on whether I should stagger the release or just get them out when I record them, so I'm just going to chuck this one up as soon as I'm done with the recording. This podcast comes off the back of a response from an article I posted up on castironstrength.com Friday of last week. It comes from David. David asks, interesting stuff, Marc. How would you define HIIT, though? Is a couple of sessions of incline treadmill sprints or hill stair sprints per week HIIT? I've done those and been breathing out of my arse at the end, but I never threw up or felt it affected my strength training. Could be a subject to do a cheeky wee podcast on, mate. Winky face. So yeah, Dave, I thought would be a good topic for a podcast, so here we are. This is a topic that I've wrote a few articles on, not a hell of a lot. This is a topic over the last kind of 3 years I've become a lot more practically astute with, or practically well versed with. Previously, beforehand, I was pretty much like primarily a strength coach, really, not really a strength and conditioning coach. As in, I worked with lifters. In my day-to-day life, 40-hour-a-week job, I would work with lifters and general fitness trainers. We'd do a little bit of conditioning with them, not the lifters, mainly the your day-to-day weekend warrior kind of people looking to get into shape. And then when I made when I started conditioning work, I was pretty much completely a gym-based SSC coach. Did some conditioning with a few athletes, but those are kind of special case scenarios, like some return to play hockey players, bits and pieces here and there, but worked out of a gym primarily. So I was coaching probably 55 hours a week, between 50 and 55 hours a week, just purely in the gym. And I mean that I got, and at the time as well, not at the time, being a competitive powerlifter as well, and coaching powerlifters, I spent a lot of time developing my skills within that kind of realm, and to this day is still kind of my major strong suit or my major skill set. However, when I made the jump across to working with professional rugby, I got a group of 45 athletes, and probably the number one important thing that I do within the role that we have is the actual conditioning element. Some coaches are really into the strength side of things. They want to know what they're benching, squatting, or whatever. Other coaches don't really care, and although it doesn't really change the physical demands of the sport, what it does change is the kind of the importance that is put on the physical prep program. So within our current setup, we have a massive influence on the conditioning of the athlete, the ability to repeat high intensity efforts, to recover quickly, to basically be able to play a high tempo game of rugby, a physical high tempo game of rugby for 80 minutes a week, and back that up week in, week out. And that's a completely different demand to just getting strong. So it's not that I obviously at 2 degrees, I've done a fair bit of reading them at times. So not like theoretically had a reasonable understanding of energy system training and conditioning training. But it's kind of the same thing where someone might have read a lot of strength and conditioning books, might have read Science of Practice, might have read Mike Stone's Principles of Practice, might have read Super Training back to front. Someone who reads and keeps up to date a lot with current literature, past literature on the topic. They might have a very in-depth knowledge, a well-developed theoretical knowledge, but without the practical application of that knowledge, then that person's opinion is pretty much null and void, really, when it comes to actually getting results. Because often what you think you're going to do and what you actually need to do and what actually works are two disparate things. In all practical application of training, this is the case. It depends on the athlete, the coach, the environment, what you've got available, what time frames you've got, how long do you have to get them in shape, what equipment do you have available. I mean, there's a whole myriad of factors that change what you can and what you can't do, and what's going to be effective and what's not going to be effective. So anyway, the article that we talked about was a piece I wrote about high intensity training. It was entitled 5 Reasons Why High Intensity Training is Not the Answer. This is one of my bugbears within training, and especially within conditioning training, is that often it's too much of a cookie cutter approach. It's things are held on like a timeline or held on an exercise. So for some reason, kettlebell swings receive a lot of love in things like T Nation, Lead FTS, different programs, or prowlers. People love prowlers. There's two tools and two methodologies that they're novel and they are reasonably effective. However, they're just bits of kit. There's nothing special about them. They don't, like, the prowler doesn't give you any kind of special training outcome. If you work with a rugby club and you have a single man sled, you already have a prowler. It's sitting out in the field and can be used. If you got a dumbbell, you have a kettlebell. Just grab it by one end and start swinging it. There's nothing special about these bits of kit. They are good to use, and we do have access to them in our gym, and we do utilize them. However, when we're talking about when I said HIIT, I was basically saying that kind of concept within the fitness industry, where it needed to be like, you need to train rather than doing the kind of cardiac output training, like 20 minutes at a heart rate threshold, or 30 minutes at a heart rate threshold, done 3 to 4 times a week. It's not. You might get up. You might get panned. You won't get short of breath, but you increase breath, respiration rate, increased heart rate, perspire a lot more. But you can hold conversation. It's not too tasking. It might be monotonous in some bits of kit, or some. Steady state training is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's an effective methodology. It works, and it works well, and it's a very non-fatiguing methodology, especially if you're talking about calorie control. Lower intensity steady state training, although might not be as time efficient per se, but what it doesn't do is doesn't put a large amount of stress on the body. Whereas if you train, let's say you do Grace, the CrossFit workout, 30 reps on a 60 kilo clean and press or clean and jerk as quick as you can. That workout might take someone who's reasonably strong but not fit 3 minutes 50, but they're going to be on the deck afterwards. They're going to be spent if they go at that 100%. And it might take someone who's not cardiovascularly fit, or someone who's not doesn't have a well developed cardiac system or cardiovascular system. It might take them 48 hours to clear out the systemic fatigue from that workout, because they're not used to training that sort of intensity. They sort of live around the highest they might get up to in the training, maybe 75% of max in a strength workout, maybe in a hypertrophy workout. And then all of a sudden they're hitting heart rate maxes because they're doing this workout, because they've decided they need to do some conditioning. So what they're doing is they've seen this on this website, thought, right, I need to do some conditioning. I don't want to do treadmill, I don't want to do cross training because I was boring. I like bars, so I'm going to jump on this and do this. And then they're tired for 2 days. Oh, that was a really good workout. I'll do that again. Do it again. Same thing happens. They're tired. And that person continues that kind of mindset where they need to go balls out in their conditioning, and they don't end up getting very well conditioned. The workouts are tough. There's very little volume in the workout. There's a high intensity in the workout. If they're not eating to support that kind of training, or they're not getting the recovery necessary to support that sort of training in enough time, overuse injury occurs, fatigue occurs. People aren't really trained to handle that kind of intensity of training. The analogy that I used within that article, and the analogy that I'll use now, is if someone comes from let's say a triathlete, decides that they need to do some strength training, so rather than doing some sub-maximal loading and using good technique and getting the reps in, getting the sets in over time, and slowly ramping the weight and slowly ramping their intensity, they go straight in and they start doing dog crap training. Dog crap training is a bodybuilding protocol, if you've never heard of it, where you use like a major lift. So for example, for chest you use bench press, and you'll do one set where you try and get a weight to like say 12 reps, as heavy as you can. After that, you'll take a minute or 10 deep breaths, 30 seconds to a minute. You'll do an hour heavy set. You try to get 8 to 10 on it. And you'll take another break, maybe 30 seconds, or they say 10 deep breaths. Take it out again. Do as many reps with it. Take it to concentric failure, and then you have your spotter help you to take it to eccentric failure, or you start doing forced reps with it, and do like heavy eccentric training kind of protocol. So that's fairly taxing for someone who's an experienced weight trainer who's maybe been following like a kind of typical men's health protocol, or been like a standard body part split, been following that for 2 or 3 years, start doing that kind of training. And they can't believe the intensity, like they get huge muscle soreness. A lot of guys can't really complete the training, they burn out after 3-4 weeks of doing it. I remember I did it with one of my friends who only did one bodybuilding show, but he was a really experienced trainee, great physique, genetically gifted guy, and he started dog crap training. I think he lasted like 3 weeks, 4 weeks before I had to pack it in, just because he couldn't handle the volume or he couldn't handle the intensity of the workouts. So only 3 workouts a week, but they are heavy workouts, and they're heavy muscle inducing workouts. So the DOMs for them is large. The stiffness afterwards is huge. They do workouts. They do like a Widowmaker on the squats, basically 20 repper, 2 or 3 sets of that, and do it on leg press. It's a pretty intense protocol. You wouldn't take a triathlete who hadn't touched a weight in their life start doing that training. So if you flip the analogy on its head, as a lifter, or maybe as someone who is new to fitness training, why are you doing high intensity protocols? You don't have the conditioning base to do that kind of training. It's not where you start, and it's not really where people should be advocating you to start either. You need to develop your aerobic system first, and to do that, you just need to train either with an interval training method that starts really sub-maximal. So an easy one is a running program. Obviously, we use this in aerobic quite a lot. There's a test called it's a 1.2K shuttle test, or also called the Mofara. It's an aerobic test, running test. So if you do an aerobic pitch, or you can do it anywhere, basically you run a 20 meter shuttle, so 40 meters. You run a 40 meter shuttle, 80 meters. Then you run a 60 meter shuttle, which is 120 meters. And so that's one lap. One lap adds up to 240 meters. You run 5 laps continuously, which is 1.2 kilometers, and you try to complete it as quickly as possible. You then use that as a maximal aerobic speed score. So that's the quickest you can run aerobically, or that's the quickest you can run and still use your aerobic system. So you work that out as meters per second. So let's say, for instance, you run that in 6 minutes. So 6 times 60 is 360. Divide 1200 by 360 seconds. So your maximal aerobic speed is 3 meters and 3.33 meters per second is your maximal aerobic speed if you run that in 6 minutes, and that would be a reasonably novice pace. That would be someone who's not, they wouldn't be completely out of shape, but they're not great aerobically, they're not great at running. So let's set up a session for this person. So this person is going to do they're going to do shuttles, a 30 second shuttle. They're going to turn on the 15-second mark, and they're going to get equal work to rest periods. So for this person, they're going to do the first week at 100% of this speed. So we're going to times 3.33. times 30. So that person is going to run 99.9 meters, so 100 meters. So if you're on a football pitch or you're on a rugby pitch, you're going to run the halfway and back, and you get 30 seconds to complete that workload. Then you get 30 seconds rest, and then you go again. So let's say the first week you do this, you do 2 sets of 6 at that intensity. Then the next session, next week, you increase the volume of that. So maybe do 2 sets of 8. Next week you increase the volume again, 3 sets of 6, and then you go back to 2 sets of 6 and increase the intensity and go to 110% of that value. So we go back to 3.33 meters a second, times that by 1.1, we get 3.663, so 3.66, 3.66 times 30, your new distance is 109.8, so 110, so the next distance you're going to run to is 55 meters and back, and you repeat that protocol over a 3-week period, progressing up the volume, and then pump up the intensity again. You do that for like that's a fairly non-taxing. Like, it's going to be difficult when you're doing it if you get the maximal aerobic speed measure right. By the time you get up to 120% of that pace. If you do it if you ramp up the intensity, you'll find that by the time you get to 120% of that pace, what will happen is if it's bang on, you complete the set, you'll have to hit the deck 'cause you're absolutely fucked. But then, like, come a minute, you're okay. Come 90 seconds, you can talk, you're not too bad. And then come the end of the 2-minute break or 2-minute rest period, you go again. And the most important thing is you complete all of those workloads. Like, you can run 100 meters within 30 seconds, and by the end of the session, it's a challenge to make it, but you can still make it, and you don't feel you're limited by your speed. You're limited by your ability to recover between intervals, and this is working the aerobic system this is an interval based training method that will work the aerobic system. You can do the exact same thing with rowing. You can use a 2-kilometer test, slightly long maybe you want to do like a 1500 or 1750 meter test. Ideally the test lasts between 5 to 6 minutes. You go from there. You do a cycling test. It's the exact same method. You'll find with kind of the more off-feet training per se, the percentages are a bit, you need to use a bit lesser of a percentage. The running, you want to work between like 90 to 120% is kind of where you want to work at. With the kind of the rowing or the cycling or the off-feet kind of fitness, you're probably looking to work more at a 70 to 100% range, just because the speeds for whatever reason. I think that tends to be I think the test we were using were probably a bit slow or a bit not too short in duration. On a watt bike would do a 3-minute maximal output test, which is too short. You want a 6-minute test. So that's probably a 2K or a 1.75 or 1,750 meter row might be appropriate, because a 5 to 6 minute pace is about the level you want to work out the intensities for 15 to 60 second efforts, using any kind of aerobic methodology. And that's developing the aerobic system. As a lifter, you don't, in your condition, as a lifter and also as a general health trainer, you don't really want to get into lactate really when in your training, because all that does is that intensity of training makes you better at that intensity of activity. So you don't really do that. You never come across that in lifting ever, and you don't come across that in life. So there's no real need to go into that intensity to get better, because you'll get fitter doing aerobic training, and if you get stronger using weight training, both of those together will increase your fitness without really inducing any kind of fatigue. You'll get some fatigue, but the fatigue is a lot less than what you'll get doing something like barbell complexes, but doing like kind of an AMRAP style, as many reps as possible in a certain time frame, or like doing 200 meter repeats as quickly as possible with like insufficient rest, or doing kettlebell swings, like as many kettlebell swings as you can in 20 seconds, or 20 kettlebell swings as quickly as you can. Anything where you're trying to push your maximal capacity, like you're trying to do X amount of work as quickly as possible, or you're trying to do as much work in a certain time frame, that's not really going to add to your fitness in the long term, because it's just kind of, it's trying to utilize, or it's trying to maximize what you've got. Whereas if you want to increase what you've got to target the aerobic system, because that's the easy thing to increase, and that's the thing that's got the biggest kind of scope for increase. It's kind of like the same with strength and power training. You can do all the power training you want, but if you haven't got the strength to back up the power, then you're going to hit a glass ceiling really quickly. It's the same with fitness. Your glass ceiling is your aerobic capacity, so that's what you want to challenge with your conditioning. Hope that's kind of give a bit more of a rationale behind that article, and why it was more of a vehicle to discuss that kind of thought process of targeted fitness training versus just doing shit for time, or just doing stuff for the sake of it, or trying to train as hard as you can within a certain time frame, because it's inefficient and it's tiring, and there's much easier ways of doing things if you just spend a little bit of time thinking about your conditioning program, implementing a baseline test, and using that baseline test to kind of inform your intervals, your targeted workloads, and also your rest periods. And also the thing we maybe didn't discuss, we'll discuss briefly, is like work to rest ratios. If you're conditioning aerobically, then you want to start with a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, and no real great reason for going beyond that. If you want to increase the difficulty of the drill, maybe without increasing the volume or the intensity, you can reduce the rest, and that will make it more difficult. But if you train in a sport where the work is greater than the rest, then that's something you need to look at. You need to look at within your conditioning training, having higher periods of work and lesser periods of rest to kind of get used to that. But still within that, you still want to have periods of, aerobic capacity work, which is just like volume and heart rate zones, then higher intensity aerobic power work, as it were. That's your kind of the mass training that I'm talking about, that aerobic training. And then other periods of like high intensity work, or repeat effort drills with reduced rest to kind of get used to that environment and get used to being able to produce power, produce performance within that kind of fatigued state. But that's kind of maybe a bit more of a sports performance, or a bit more of a nuanced kind of podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast. It has overrun a lot more than I thought I was going to, and we're at 23 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Hope that's answered your question fully, Dave. Hopefully, this is a topic I think that we don't cover enough within the kind of strength training community, and certainly one that a lot of lifters and people could get a lot of worth out of, something they bought into their own training. 2 kind of interval training sessions a week is not going to kill you, and it will make you a lot fitter, and you will recover from your sets, you'll recover from your workouts a lot faster, and your energy will be higher on a day-to-day level. It's not really anything negative about conditioning, to be honest with you, as long as it's done properly. If it's done incorrectly, then there's a lot of negatives to go with it, but it's the same with everything in training. Okay, that'll complete this episode. Questions, comments, please leave them below. You can catch us on Facebook, the Cast Iron Strength Facebook page, on the web, castironstrength.com. OnlineStrengthCoach.com is not dead and buried, it is in the works. As always, email speedpowerforums@gmail.com if you want to catch up. Welcome all questions, any topics. I will speak to them. I'll be back with you tomorrow for another podcast. Until then, this is Marc of your daily online strength coach podcast, or your online strength coach podcast, which I'll be taking. Signing out. Goodbye.